Hey rich girls, Kirby here, and today we are diving right into a timely topic that just might affect you or someone you love starting in 2026. And while you might think that date is way far ahead in the future, the reality is that you need to start making changes now in order to get ahead of this potentially huge retirement change. This is Rich Girl's Guide, where we demystify the world of personal finance to help you create a financially successful and fulfilling life. I'm your host, Kirby Delicano, and I worked in wealth management for over 6 years before leaving the office to focus on my business and my family. So right off the bat, this is only going to affect you if you are 50 years or older, you make at least $145,000 annually, and you plan on maxing out your 401k, 403b, or 457b. Now, before you click out of this episode, I do urge you to think about anyone in your life that could be affected, like your parents or an older sibling or even aunts and uncles. Because this is something that has the potential to cause huge issues for folks who pushed off saving for retirement until later in life, aka most Americans. The catch-up rule is specifically designed for those nearing retirement to be able to put away more money, albeit in the worst decade, which is right before they retire. If you haven't already listened to my compound growth episode, I will link that below, but essentially the closer you get to needing your retirement funds, the less compound growth you will receive. The good news? The opposite is also true. The further away you are from needing to touch your retirement funds, the more compound growth you'll receive. Every dollar you contribute in your 20s and 30s, or even in your teen years if you are able to, are going to compound significantly more than the dollars you contribute in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. I know, yikes. Let's take a look at this quick example. If you contribute just $100 into your 401k when you are 20 years old and you never add a penny more, you would have $7,289 by the time you are 65. That is $100 of contributions and $7,189 of earnings. That is insane. If you had waited until you were 50 to contribute to your 401k, you would have to contribute $1,745 in order to get that same ending balance if you had contributed just $100 when you were 20. Now, these figures are assuming you are invested in the S&P 500, which has averaged an annual rate of return of 10% over the past 42 years. In my time in the wealth management industry, a 10% annual return is a very attainable goal over a long period of time. Obviously, some years will be better than others, like in 2021, when the return was positive 26.89%. Yep, you heard that right. And other years will be a bit more rocky, like in 2022, when it was down 19.4%. It's giving ick. This is why we continue to put away savings month over month, year over year, and don't necessarily fret over what the market is doing in just one moment in time, because the market is going to do what it's going to do, regardless of what you try to do to outsmart it. I could talk about compound growth all day. So let's get back to the topic at hand. Changes to 401k catch-up contributions. Let's start with what exactly is a catch-up contribution. Anyone who participates in a 401k and will be 50 years old by the end of the year is eligible to make what is called a catch-up contribution. Not catch up like the condiment, catch up as in you need to catch up on your retirement savings. The IRS determines contribution limits every year. In other words, they can set a maximum on the amount of money that you're allowed to put in to your 401k. While the maximum is typically way higher than most people can afford to put away, this maximum limit can cause serious issues for individuals who make a ton of money in a single year and don't want to get screwed over with a giant tax bill. According to Vanguard's How America Saves Report 2024, which, just a side note, they put out this report every single year and it's absolutely fascinating. I'll link it below. This report is looking at 2023 data, and it says only 15% of eligible employees took advantage of this catch-up contribution. Now, me being an optimist, I could argue that perhaps participants had already saved accordingly for retirement during the previous 3 decades and therefore did not need to utilize the catch-up limit. Unfortunately, according to the Federal Reserve Board survey of consumer finance conducted in 2022, the average retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 was a whopping $204,000. Hopefully you already know this, but unless you have a big ass trust fund coming your way or you plan on working until like the day you die, that is not enough money for a 55-year-old, let alone a 60-year-old, to retire with. If you need a step-by-step guide to figure out exactly how much money you need to retire, check out my episode, How Much You Need to Retire. I'll link that one below. This is a completely self-funded passion project of mine, and in order to continue making more content, I would absolutely be gobsmacked if you could pop on over to my YouTube channel, Rich Girls Guide Podcast with Kirby, linked below for your convenience, and hit that subscribe button. Every follow helps, and the best part is that it is completely free. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. Moral of the story here is that many Americans will be faced with making catch-up contributions in their later years in order to, quote-unquote, catch up on their retirement savings. And this is where the changes come into play. Right now, in 2024, employees can contribute up to $23,000 a year into their 401k. Now, while that might sound like a crazy high figure, because it is a crazy high figure, for high-income earners and for those who have slacked on their retirement savings in their early years, it actually might not be enough for them to continue their way of living in retirement. Take, for example, the average figure we just discussed for Americans aged 55 to 64. If you are 55 and you have $204,000 in your 401k, you would need to start contributing that maximum amount of $23,000 every single year in order to retire at age 65, with $944,548 in retirement savings. This is taking into account an annual return of 10%. While that might sound like a lot, it's just shy of $1 million, it's actually not that much when you're accounting for inflation and the ever-increasing medical expenses that are bound to pop up later in life. If you follow the golden rule of 4%, which in a nutshell states that if you only withdraw 4% of your invested savings, those savings will last forever, in theory, which means on an annual basis, you can withdraw $37,782. And guys, that includes taxes. So as long as you can live on $37,000 a year before taxes are taken out, then $944,000 in retirement should suffice. The catch-up rule allows for those who are over the age of 50 to contribute an extra $7,500 into their 401k for a grand total of $30,500. Now, the IRS currently gives you two options within your 401k. First, you can owe less tax now by putting some of your income away tax deferred. In this scenario, you are saying that you will pay taxes later on when you go to pull the money out of your retirement bucket. Income given to you by your employer is taxable in the current year. So any income that is not given to you and is placed in your tax-deferred 401k is not taxed, at least not right now. When you go to pull those funds out from the tax-deferred 401k is when you will owe taxes, and only on the amount you pull out. Your second option is a Roth contribution, also known as an after-tax contribution. With a Roth contribution, you pay the tax on your income now in the current year, just as if you would if your employer gave you that money in your paycheck, even though they didn't. You're probably wondering why anyone would choose to pay the tax on the income now if they don't actually get the income now. Here's the cool part. When you pull funds from a Roth 401k, otherwise known as the after-tax portion of your 401k, those withdrawals are completely tax-free, including the earnings. You are essentially giving up the tax savings now to reap the reward of tax-free withdrawals later. Now, you can put some money into this pre-tax portion of your 401k and some money into the Roth portion. The 401k company keeps track of how much you contributed to each bucket. Any earnings you receive on the pre-tax money will stay in the pre-tax bucket, and the same goes for the Roth. Any earnings you earn on that after-tax money stays in the after-tax bucket. Here is where the new tax law comes into play. If you make over $145,000 this year, you are most likely looking to bring down your taxable income as much as possible. That means putting money away tax deferred into the pre-tax portion of your 401k. But, and here's what everyone is going cuckoo banana brains over, if you make over $145,000 in the year 2025, you are not allowed to make a tax-deferred catch-up contribution in 2026. You are only allowed to make a Roth catch-up contribution. Now, this got delayed because the exact verbiage in the Secure 2.0 Act was extremely vague. Originally, this was supposed to go into effect January of this year, 2024. Here is the original statement. Section 603 of the Act mandates that age 50 catch-up contributions for higher paid retirement plan participants be made on a Roth basis. Specifically, this provision requires catch-up contributions by those participants with more than $145,000 adjusted for inflation in wages, defined as IRC Section 312A, from the employer sponsoring the plan in the prior year, be made on a Roth basis beginning January 1st, 2024, thus eliminating the option to make pre-tax catch-up contributions. This rule applies to catch-up contributions for 401k, 403b, and governmental 457b plans. Notably, it does not affect catch-up contributions for IRAs, which includes simple IRAs. Can you still contribute $23,000 as a normal tax-deferred contribution? Yes, and you can still make a catch-up Roth contribution of $7,500 on top of that. But you cannot put the full $30,500 into your tax-deferred 401k. Here's where this rule starts to get even crazier. What happens if your employer does not allow for Roth contributions within your 401k plan? Yeah, that's a possibility. A huge piece of this puzzle is the fact that 401k plans are not required to allow Roth contributions. Meaning, if your 401k plan does not allow Roth contributions, you cannot make any catch-up contributions, even if you wanted to. Luckily, many retirement plans have started offering Roth 401k options over the past, I would say, 5 to 10 years. And according to Vanguard's How America Saves report, in 2023, 82% of plans allowed for Roth contributions. My fear is that many Americans who will be affected by this change have no idea that it's coming down the pike. When I worked in wealth management back in the summer of 2023, it was actually news to all the financial advisors that this was going to be a law. Nobody knew that this change was coming about until 5 months before it was supposed to take effect. Luckily, it did get pushed back by 2 years, but you better believe we were scrambling to call clients and take a look at all of our 401k plans we were managing to see which participants would be effective and what we could do to help them. So what should you do if you are going to be affected by this change? First, I would confirm with your 401k provider whether or not you are able to make Roth contributions. So wherever your 401k plan is held, if it's at Vanguard, Empower, Fidelity, any of those places, reach out to them and ask if they allow for Roth contributions. If they do allow for Roth contributions, then you're pretty much set. You will need to update your retirement plan accordingly. If you work with a financial advisor, just let them know and they will happily run through those numbers with you. Otherwise, you can plug in these catch-up contributions as after tax rather than pre-tax wherever you keep tabs on your investments. If you are accustomed to making pre-tax catch-up contributions, just know that you will be paying a little bit more income tax starting in 2026, since any catch-up contributions cannot be deducted from your taxable income. On the flip side, if your plan does not allow for Roth contributions, you will need to make some adjustments. First, I would reach out to your employer and request that they add on the ability to make Roth contributions. It may be worth speaking with coworkers who are in the same boat as you. If enough employees raise concern over this, your employer may very well make changes to the 401k plan. If you decide to go this route, you really need to start having these conversations now. 401k plans cannot be changed on a whim. There are paperwork that needs to be done, people that need to get involved, and it could honestly be up to a year before they're able to make any substantial plan changes to a 401k plan. You will also need to be prepared for the chance that they decide not to add on the Roth option, leaving you with no ability to make a catch-up contribution. If this is the case, not to worry. I would simply start making backdoor Roth contributions if I were in your shoes. I'll link my episode that goes over the backdoor Roth contributions here, but essentially this method allows for high income earners to make non-deductible contributions into a traditional IRA and then immediately convert those funds into a Roth IRA. If you utilize this method and are over the age of 50, you can actually contribute up to $8,000 annually into a Roth IRA, which is $500 more than the catch-up contribution limit of $7,500. Of course, you are still losing the income deduction, but if you are in need of saving as much money as possible for retirement, then I would highly recommend thinking about this option and talking through it with a professional. Even if you won't be directly affected by this change in 2026, either you are under the income threshold or are under the age of 50, this is still a huge change for retirement plans that can and most likely will affect you in the future. The more you can learn now to get ahead of these types of sweeping changes, the better off you will be in the long run. And if nothing else, I hope this sparks some fire under some people's butts to start looking at your 401k and retirement options, and maybe even start adding some money to your retirement. Let me know what you think in the comments. I am really curious to see how many people already knew about this 401k change and how many people will actually be affected. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I will have a brand new episode out Monday. Till then, have a wonderful week. Later, rich girls.